Hello, my name is Kathy Colliver. I'm a marketing professional with experience across a variety of disciplines in marketing. I have a bit of a non-traditional background in that I don't have a marketing degree. So I took a year off between high school and college and had a full-time internship in marketing. I ended up attending a liberal arts college, Amherst College, and studied a variety of subjects. They did not offer marketing classes. I continued doing full-time internships in marketing and communications and related areas during the summers in college, and then continued my marketing career after graduating from undergrad. I also went back to school to get an MBA in business administration. I started out my career in consumer marketing for nonprofit theaters, spent about 10 years doing that, and then shifted to business marketing after receiving my MBA, and I've been doing that for about 10 years. In my marketing career, I've worked across a number of different industries as well as business settings. So that includes both nonprofit and corporate, small and large companies. And in terms of industries, I've worked in direct marketing at an agency. I've worked in health insurance, automotive, at a very large media company that was publicly traded, as well as currently at a software development consulting agency. One thing that's interesting about ethics in marketing is considering whether you're talking about consumer marketing or business to business marketing. They can differ in a lot of ways, and the ethical dilemmas you may face may be different as well. Sometimes you will face similar dilemmas in either of those settings, but you can also have some dilemmas that are specific to that setting. So, for example, you'll want to consider what are norms to do with privacy. This is where a lot of marketing ethics comes into play. It used to be that there were different norms and also even different regulations for consumer marketing versus business to business marketing. That has become less the case currently, especially as more and more people are working from home due to the pandemic. When you look at privacy norms for business to business marketing, you often have the general accepted norm that business information is all public anyway. It is absolutely accepted to be able to call someone because business phone numbers are publicly listed. You don't need permission. There is not a sense of a do not call list in the way that there is for consumer marketing. That has very much shifted as people have been working from home due to the pandemic. Just because somebody's cell phone number is available does not mean that you should be calling it if you do not have their permission. And you should absolutely be checking against do not call lists if you are doing call outreach, telemarketing, anything of that nature. So there are some different norms that have been shifting over the years, and a couple of the scenarios that I'll go over relate to some of those shifting norms. There's also a lot of legislation that has changed recently, and there's a lot of legislation that's in the works. So these are all things to consider as you're thinking about ethics in marketing. One of the major ethical dilemmas within marketing is being able to decide appropriately when it's okay, when you have permission to market to someone. So this is not thinking about advertising. It's not thinking about things that are earned media that are sort of out in the world, but more direct marketing. Direct marketing involves direct communication to specific people through, could be a variety of methods. When you're doing that, you really want to think about, do you have permission to send a message to someone, whether it's by email, mail, phone, text, etc. You really need to think about whether you have permission. There's been a lot that has changed over the years related to this. I've had many occasions where business stakeholders that are in departments outside of marketing have asked marketing to just email everyone in the database, right? What's wrong with that? There could be a lot of things wrong with that. Is everyone in the database an existing customer? Are you talking about sending a message that is related to them as a customer, or that is a marketing or sales message? So there's lots of questions you need to ask yourself in this sort of situation. In these situations, depending upon the context, I've helped educate other stakeholders about what are acceptable permissions, what are acceptable norms, what is legal, and also what is the right business case. There are a lot of times where even if you can do something, even if it's legal, it's not necessarily acceptable from a norms perspective, and it may not be the best choice. So just because you can send an email to past customers doesn't mean you always want to send an email to every single one of your past customers, even people that you haven't worked with in many, many years. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's the ethical perspective that they have not opted in necessarily to communication. And so that's a question. But also from the business side of it, helping people understand that certain decisions aren't effective as well can be useful in making the case towards more ethical marketing practices. This brings up a related issue of opt-ins. If you're maintaining an opt-in email list, you want to be able to document that opt-in status. Most email service providers will give you tools to be able to have that documentation. And so it's really important that you stay on top of that. It's a best practice, but it's also very useful if any questions were to arise. If you do switch from one email service provider to another, being able to export the data related to those opt-ins before you put that data into your new email service provider is also really important. So this is both good data hygiene, and it's helping document that you are following an ethical marketing strategy in terms of having opt-in permission for contacts that you're sending marketing or sales messages to. Another marketing ethical dilemma that you may face, especially working closely with sales departments, is the idea of list purchases or collecting lists of contacts through related methods. List purchases is something that has been around for quite a while, especially in business to business marketing, but also in consumer marketing. It has started to go by the wayside a bit as privacy norms have updated towards a feeling of people should opt into communication. There are still companies out there that sell lists. So you'll want to make sure that if you are looking at something like that, you're considering whether these are opted in contacts. Another method that many companies use is to do some sort of promotional content, or gated content is often used in business to business marketing, where people, when they're filling out the form, have a checkbox and may be automatically selected or not. There are different methods used to opt into communications from the company, marketing and sales communications in particular. Everyone is not always aware that that's what they are doing. There's not a lot of regulation in the United States around this yet. So when you're looking at those sorts of promotions, it's important to look at that from the perspective of being very clear to people who are filling out the form that they are opting into communication and what types of communication that would be. If it's marketing, sales messages, what types of messages. Again, this is best practices around opt-in marketing. So what I have typically done in the past in working with business stakeholders and other departments, especially sales, around list purchases, is helping them understand what are the best practices, what are the norms, what is the legislation that has been passed or is about to be passed that may govern this, and then also what's the business case. Very often, lists that are formed from list purchases or having folks opt in without being very aware of what they're opting into, just because they want to get a piece of gated content or enter a promotion, are not going to perform well for whatever campaign you have in mind. So again, it's helping educate your stakeholders as you're doing your marketing work around what is appropriate, what is useful, and what will actually help them reach their goal. The last thing I want to leave you with is that there is a lot that is shifting very rapidly in marketing specific to data privacy. Legislation in Europe and California have specified very particular details about consumers, individuals' relationship to their data and how companies are and are not allowed to manage that data. This has a lot of implications across all different marketing disciplines: website analytics, email marketing, advertising that uses tracking mechanisms. There's a lot there. There's also a number of states that have just added legislation, such as Virginia, or have pending legislation that could be going into effect in the coming years. So it's very important to keep on top of the news around that legislation and those trends, as well as best practices and norms. The recent iOS update from Apple also adds another wrinkle in that people who use the Mail app on iPhones can now essentially very easily opt out of any email tracking. So another thing to think about is not just what is okay for you as a marketer to track, but what is actually useful in what you're tracking. So many things are shifting and changing. Metrics that used to be reliable, like open rates or click-through rates for email, are no longer as reliable when you have something like this iOS setting or spam filters that are doing test clicks on emails that can trigger click-throughs. So keep in mind that it's a combination of what is the right thing to do, what is useful, and what makes sense as a modern marketer. People are not going to accept the same things that they used to. So a lot of what we are used to thinking about as norms in marketing and typical key performance indicators in marketing are really changing. This idea of marketing attribution is a little bit like a mythical unicorn. And there are probably going to be very new ways that we look at measuring marketing success as we also balance what we want to know against respecting privacy of our audience.
Hello, thank you guys for joining us today for this conversation on ethical dilemmas. Webster's dictionary defines ethics as moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. So we will start out by introducing our panelists and asking them to share about themselves a little bit. Ben.
Perfect. My name is Ben Winters. I'm an assurance manager with TDT CPAs and Advisors here in West Des Moines.
Hank.
Hi, Hank Norm. I'm president of Ramco Innovations. We're a company that provides factory automation solutions to companies. Prior to that, I worked in public accounting for several years.
And Sandy.
Hey, I'm Sandy Smith. I'm a director of accounting for Principal Financial Group. We have an asset management arm, Principal Global Investors. And my office is in downtown Des Moines, but since my new role of leading finance teams in Singapore and London coincided with COVID, I work primarily out of my home in Urbandale.
Thank you all for joining me this morning for this conversation. Each of you are certified public accountants or CPAs. CPAs are required to take an ethics exam in order to obtain your CPA license. Ben, can you start us out with your definition of ethics?
Yeah, so kind of like what Lindsay said, I think it's just your moral principles that just affect how you make your decisions and how you lead your life.
Thank you. Hank.
Yeah, mine's pretty simple as well. It's really just making the right decision or doing the right activity, no matter the impact. Because as career evolves and your personal life and professional life start to grow, impact becomes something that weighs in on your decision-making ability. So a little longer than I thought, I guess.
And Sandy.
Yeah, for me, it's fairly straightforward and similar to what Hank said, it's doing the right thing. But sometimes this can be tricky, because it's the right thing for who? Is it the right thing for the company, the customer, me, other employees? At the end of the day, I just want to be sure that if my actions or decisions made the 10 o'clock news, my mother, who's my ethics barometer, would be proud of the choices I made.
Very well said. Ben, can you tell us why is ethics important to the accounting profession?
As for me, just being in public accounting, I think it just helps to ensure our quality of work is accurate and objective as we're doing our audits for the users of the financial statements that we put together. I think without the ethics, our information could end up being misleading or damaging to the person reading the financial statements.
Hank, from an industry perspective, why is ethics important in your role?
Really, it's leading by example. I'm not big on titles, but as president, it's my job to set the tone at the top and really make sure people understand that ethics are a top priority. I had the good or bad fortune, whatever you want to call it, of starting my career when the Arthur Andersen and Enron debacle went down, 2001, 2002. So, I was a senior in college when all of that happened, and it was, kind of a shock to the system because I'm studying to become an accountant, eventually want to be a CPA, and then see these industry and, accounting pillars start to tumble because ethics fell short. So I've always remembered that from my senior year in college, carried all the way through that, it matters no matter the level.
Thank you. Can you give us a brief overview of the Enron scandal and how ethics played into that? Some of our high school students may not be familiar with that.
Yeah, they weren't maybe even born yet. Really, so you had a large Fortune 500 company working with one of the large accounting firms, and they really grew a little bit too close. Decisions started to get a little tougher. And in some cases, obviously I wasn't in any of those rooms or in any of those decisions, but it sounds like many of the folks that were involved didn't even really know what they were doing was unethical. They were doing what their boss told them to do. And they say they were just starting a job. This is what I do. So they were contributing unknowingly to something that was unethical. It took someone that asked the question, say, this doesn't really look right. This accounting treatment isn't quite right. What should we do about that? So really it was, the CPA firm and the Enron became too close and started to make some accounting and reporting decisions that weren't ethical.
Absolutely. And that really ties back to your statement that it all starts at the top. That tone is set at the top. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sandy, you work on an international spectrum. Give us an overview of how ethics plays into your role internationally.
Yeah, I think that, ethical behavior is the same everywhere, but we have a lot of additional things that we have to consider, right? We're dealing with a lot of different governments, a lot of different regulatory bodies, a lot of different tax rules. And so trying to be a global company and have consistency and fit our procedures and processes into each of these countries, there's often ethical questions that come up in how to handle certain decisions as far as how it's treated by local tax authorities and things like that. So we often have to step back and look at things from a global perspective and then also put on that local lens and see if our decision might be the same or different.
To follow up on that, how have you grown to understand the different cultures that you're working with? And you're right, ethics are ethics, right? But how do those different cultures and governments, et cetera, impact the way that you lead by example each day?
I think that it just applies a different lens to it. And I think this is true with, each job that you have, each experience within your career that you have just applies a different lens to how you approach leadership and ethics. I've had to consider a lot of different things that are more common practice in different countries than they are in the US, that I've had to think about whether or not it's an ethical question or if it's just a legal question. And there is a difference. There's things that might be legal, but could still be unethical, or might be unethical that could still be legal. So vice versa.
Thank you. Sandy, tell us a little bit about social responsibility that you have as a leader to act ethically in your work. How do you exhibit those skills, and how do you help your employees develop those skills?
Sure. I think what's most important to me is to be a straight shooter, to be really transparent. I try to model the behavior that I want my team to emulate. We really discuss out loud consequences for decisions. So, I'm not just thinking stuff in my brain and telling them what to do. We're really discussing these things out loud so they can follow along with, why we're making a decision and not just what the end result of the decision is. I've been really influenced by my leaders and colleagues throughout my career. And I really believe that the actions we all take have a ripple effect and influence the people all around us, especially our direct team members. So we really have to foster an environment where any team member can challenge or question the actions and decisions of colleagues or me, as long as it's done in a professional and respectful way.
Thank you. Hank, have you in your work been working in public accounting? Maybe you have a client who comes to you and wants to go borrow money to expand their business. They have their financial statements in front of them and they ask you, could we tweak this number or that number? How would you approach that?
I would just explain to them, us as CPAs, we're held to a higher code of ethics, and we're there to independently and objectively assess the information that we're given from them to us to put together the financial statements to provide to the bank for their financing, and just kind of explain to them, with that, the consequences of that decision and the trickle effect that it could have with the bank in making their decisions and lending them the money, and what that could affect other people in the bank as far as them defaulting on the loan, just because we adjusted one number that they wanted us to adjust. So I think that's just kind of one thing to kind of take away from that. We just not look at what the immediate impact of that was, just the long-term effect that it could create.
Ben, say that you went along with their request and tweaked that number the way that they wanted you to. And then it was discovered that that was fraudulent. What could the impact be on you as a CPA?
For one, I could lose my license, or probably would lose my license. And I think just once you start down that path, I think, like I said, it's just a trickle effect that what are they going to ask you to do next? And what's the extent of that next ask, and where is that going to lead, and who's that going to affect? So.
Thank you. Hank, in your career, do you have a specific example of an ethical dilemma that you have been faced with?
Yeah, I gave this some thought, and you know, there are really things that come up over time. And you know, fairly recently, you had a manufacturing partner send myself and a colleague a file inadvertently, and that file contained some information that, you know, could have been you know, advantageous for us for our business. You know, if viewed, didn't even open the file. The other person on it was our sales manager, and I called them immediately and said, hey, you received an email, don't open it, don't open the file. I'm calling the vendor. So I called the vendor immediately and said, hey, you sent this to me, it wasn't for me, it was for someone else. Just wanted to let you know I didn't open the file that was in there, so I didn't gain access to anything. You know, it's one of those things where it wouldn't necessarily be illegal. You know, nobody might ever know, but I would know. And you know, to Ben's point, we're held to a higher standard, and I believe firmly in that. You know, it just not something that I would be able to sleep at night, not something I'd be comfortable with, not something that if I had sent that email, I'd want to know from the other, you know, the receiving party that happened. So again, those things just pop up periodically that you're not thinking about. We were talking earlier, kind of offline here. You could relate that to you're a high school student walking down the street and somebody drops a $5 bill. You know, what do? They're probably not going to miss it. They're for sure not going to know. They're going to keep on walking. But you know, what do you do with that $5 bill? Do you pick it up, put it in your pocket, or do you holler and say, hey, here's the $5 bill you're missing? You know, it's decisions like that come up in the business world too. That $5 bill is played out in the business setting more often than you would think.
Fantastic. So, Sandy, ethics can be an uncomfortable topic and kind of weird to talk about. Here's an example for you. You're a clerk at your local Casey's. Every shift, you grab a soda out of the cooler. Talk to me about the ethics decision behind that. And is that right or wrong? What are the long-term impacts in making that the choice to grab that soda out of the cooler, which seems like such an innocent thing to do, and so such a small decision to make. But talk to me about ethics behind that.
Yeah, it's really, again, about the long-term impacts of that decision. So while, yes, we understand that it's only probably going to cost the company a couple dollars that one time, if every employee throughout the company did that every day, it could cost the company a lot of money, which would mean they wouldn't be able to probably give raises like they should, or they might mark up the cost of the goods to the public. So customers are having to pay more for those goods because the employees are stealing. Also, your behavior could be noticed by people around you. You know, somebody else who's working over in the kitchen of that Casey's, you know, maybe they are seeing you do that and they think, oh, well, if that's acceptable for that person to do it, then it's no big deal if I just have, you know, a slice of pizza or take a pizza home at the end of the night. So it just has effects beyond that one soda or that one instance that you're considering.
Thank you. Hank, here's a scenario for you. Your secretary takes extra pins once a week, just grabs some pins, thinks, you know, I'm doing some work from home. I'm going to take this box of pins home with me. Maybe it happens once a month, maybe it happens once a week, but it starts with pins, and then next thing you know, she's taking a ream of paper.
Mm-hmm.
How do you as a leader address something like that? Is that an ethical decision on her part? Is it right or wrong? Is it a small impact or a large impact to your company?
Well, it's, can start small, but it can definitely grow from there. We say how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you're willing to take the pen, what else are you going to take? And it can seem to grow. From there, would just address it immediately and, have that discussion and try to figure out, what's the cause of that. We were talking how, ethical behavior ties into fraudulent behavior at times too. And there's usually a handful of factors involved for that. Nobody really thinks, hey, I'm just going to start being unethical. It's really some factors that are underlying there. And we talk about it in our CPA profession. It's kind of widely known. There's what's known as the fraud triangle when you start to enter these things. And there's usually 3 factors present. There's an opportunity, the office supply cabinet is unlocked and it's open all day. So I have the opportunity to go take that pen. 2, there's, some pressure, there's some motives there. They're saying, okay, well, I need that, my kid's doing a project at home and I need additional supplies for it, markers and, all sorts of supplies. I need that and I don't have enough money. And 3rd, they rationalize. So they're going to provide some sort of rationalization for that, hey, I'm underpaid. So since I'm underpaid, then I deserve these markers, to give to my kid at home. So again, nobody intends to be unethical. Nobody intends to do fraudulent activities, but when those 3 factors are present, it starts to happen, and it can happen. It does happen. So, long answer there, Lindsay, to your question, but yes.
Fantastic. As we wrap up today, I want to give each of you an opportunity to say some final closing comments about ethics and about the ethics in your profession. Ben, let's start with you, please.
I guess I would just like to take away, that your actions do have consequences, whether they're small or large. Kind of back to the beginning question, as far as that you posed to Sandy, as far as how did you learn to be ethical? I would just take with you the simple thing that I was always told to treat others as you'd want to be treated, and just kind of take that with you as you go. Would you want someone, if you dropped a $5 bill, in Hank's example, would you want them to give you the $5 bill back, or would you want them to keep it? I think just simplifying ethics as how you would want to be treated is just a good thing to take away from ethics.
Thanks, Ben. Hank.
Yeah, I guess first of all, the fact that this group is in there listening and learning from folks that have been in industry is a great start. Learning from examples from others. I also think it's really important of who you surround yourself with. Using that $5 bill example again, if you're in a group that says keep it, you're probably going to be headed down a path that you're going to make that decision to keep it. If you're in a group that says give it back, that helps drive your moral compass, whether it's your parents or your friend group or school group. That really drives your decisions as well, because as you grow and build your professional life and you want to be a leader, ethics matters. Ethics are very important. And folks that are unethical seem to fall short pretty quickly in the business world. So I'd say just start early and get a good start on it.
Thank you, Hank. Sandy.
Yeah, I'm going to take right off from where Hank left it. I really try to surround myself with ethical people, and that's both in my community and at work. I definitely try to distance myself from those that I would consider shady. Over my career, I've worked with some great leaders, and I really try to take the best of them with me to my next job, really try to identify the best in people and try to incorporate that into my life. And then I try to apply the same set of values at work that I do at home and at church and when I'm interacting with my community. I really feel like that strengthens self-awareness of my value set and really offers consistency and a sense of comfort when I am making decisions, that I would make the same decision no matter what situation I was in.
Thank you. And thank you to all three of the panelists for joining us today to talk about ethical dilemmas. I hope that everyone takes away a great message or two. There's certainly lots to think about after hearing this session. So thank you for joining us. As we wrap up today, we've had some pretty heavy discussion here. Let's lighten things up a little bit. Ben, start us out and tell us your favorite part of your job.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I would just say being on the public side of accounting, I get to work with just a lot of different businesses and people. And I think that's just one thing I enjoy, just kind of hearing their side of it and just learning different things about different businesses that we do interact with. That's something I enjoy.
Thank you. Hank.
Yeah, mine's similar to Ben. When I was in public accounting, I got to do the same thing and work with a lot of different type of companies on the financial side. Moving over to the private side, I get to do the same thing, which is awesome. It's kind of like to show, if anybody's ever seen it, how it's made. Our company gets on the factory floor and works with companies and helps them automate. And my job on the financial side of that is, okay, how does that investment in new technology, whether it's maybe a robotic system, how is that going to help them make more widgets or more Cheerios or more golf balls or, whatever the product is, we get to help them. So that's really exciting for me to see how it's made and see the impact on the financial side. Accountants are not nerds. We get to do cool stuff.
Sandy, close us out, please.
Yeah, for me, I'm in a role where I get to travel quite a bit and experience a lot of different cultures. So in the coming year, I'm expecting to go to Singapore and London and meet with my teams there. And not only do we get to interact over Teams or Zoom calls all the time with them and kind of experience their daily lives and what's going on with them and their different cultures. But I also get to go visit them and see where they live and experience that as well. So I love that part about my job.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been a fun conversation, and I hope that each of the participants walking away from participating in this has learned something about ethical dilemmas. So if you have questions, we will certainly be happy to answer them for you. Thank you. Hi, Ben. Thanks for joining me for a conversation on Volkswagen's emissions evasion today.
Hey, Lindsay, thanks for having me. I guess along with the Volkswagen emissions evasion, I know it's not the first thing you think of when you think of a CPA or a certified public accountant. But the ethics behind the case is a vital attribute to the CPA profession, and it's something we carry and pride ourselves on in the profession. I believe ethics isn't something that you're born with, but it's something you're taught, and kind of as you go through your life, it's something that kind of molds your ethical behavior. And it's just as simple as just like a red light, green light scenario. We know that running a red light is a bad decision, but we don't always get caught. And kind of that's kind of a simplistic view to kind of as we go into this Volkswagen scenario today. So just it's important to know as you start your career path, it's important to just start developing your own ethical framework.
Absolutely. So let's dig into this VW scenario. It's very easy in hindsight to say someone made a wrong decision, but let's take a step back and look at the entire picture and put ourselves in their shoes.
Yeah, so I guess I'll first kind of set up the scenario. So kind of back in 2015, Volkswagen failed to meet the emission standards, and it was found that they used a defeat device, which was mainly like it's described to defeat the testing in the labs. They were testing the emissions that it was putting out. I mean, long story short, the engineers and executives just wanted a successful clean diesel, but as they quickly learned, it was very expensive to develop and maintain that high level of the emissions that was required by the automotive industry.
Definitely. At the time, these employees probably thought they were working in the best interest of the company. Somehow they decided that rather than continuing with research and development, they felt they were working in the best interest of the company and the customers by creating a patch to pass the test. Ben, what do you see as the motivation for VW to make a device that fabricated the test versus fixing the engine itself to meet the standards?
Yeah, great question. I think profit, probably played a huge role in the company's decision, and a big motivator for the executives and engineers. As they kind of got so far into it, they already had a lot of money invested in marketing the clean diesel as their new lineup. And so they had a choice. They could either find an alternative to bypass the emissions and get the clean diesel out at a lower price where they felt like they could make more money, or they could have went back and fixed the issue and spent the needed money to meet the standards and perform more ethically.
And looking back, this was obviously an unethical strategy by Volkswagen. In retrospect, do you think that it was wise on financial grounds? Will you explain that? And what do you think, Ben?
Yeah, so I guess first off, you can kind of see by the fines, it's roughly $20 billion just in fines alone, let alone that they caused their shareholders, the dealerships that sold Volkswagens, their reputation in general took a huge hit. And then also just the employees that were working for Volkswagen that really didn't probably know about this defeat device that was going on, that thought that they were behaving ethically within the organization. I think just in hindsight, they probably would have chose to take the ethical path if they could have reworked the scenario and taken a different route in the beginning.
So just to recap, it's important to begin framing your ethical perspective early. High school is certainly not too early to take a pause and consider the consequences of your behaviors.
Yeah, for sure, Lindsay. Like I said, and I started off with, the case can just be as simple as a red light, green light scenario. I know there's a lot more gray area with the Volkswagen scenario, a lot of more working factors. But I think it's just good to note that as you work through your education and experiences, all those fragments, all the different experiences that you have help frame your perception on life and ethics and just help mold your ethical code.
So Ben, I have heard that a certified public accountant, a CPA, there's like an ethical oath that they take or an exam that they take or something like that. Can you tell us about that? And how does that play into your daily work as a CPA?
Yeah, so I guess first off, the CPA exam consists of 4 parts. And then after you do pass those 4 parts, all CPAs are required to take an ethics exam as well before they're able to get their license. And then kind of in the profession day to day, it's just really important that we kind of live and perform our careers with a very high ethical standards. People are constantly relying on the services that we provide, that they're accurate and that they can, really look at those numbers or reports and know that they can rely on them and that we're not behaving unethically to change numbers or do something like that to better a business or so they can get different funding, different grants. And a lot of grantors also rely on the information that we provide, not just the businesses. So we just need to take that into consideration, who we're affecting if we did perform unethically.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thanks so much for joining me today for this conversation around the Volkswagen case study. I encourage students to reach out to us if they have any questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay.